Today I am talking about duping designer jumpers or designer pieces, how I go about doing that, how I've done it in the past, plans that I have in the future, and yeah, just generally my perspectives on duping designer pieces. Yeah. So I've already filmed the segment. I filmed like a full 20-minute rant of just like me nerding out about copyright infringement. And yeah, just like it was supposed to be like my perspective on duping sweaters. And I watched it back and I think, I don't know, I was watching it and I was like, I would not want to watch this in a YouTube video. Like I couldn't see myself enjoying it. So it stands to reason that you guys wouldn't either. I think I came off a bit school marmy, you know, like I was like, oh, copyright infringement bad and don't do this and then like I was just trying to be something that I wasn't. And I also think it was just kind of like a mask of insecurities. It was a way of me justifying insecurities that I have around being creative and taking inspiration from other people. You know, I think for as long as I've created things, made things, I've felt kind of like a fraud whilst doing it. I think I have one of those brains where I am thriving and I am feeling my most creative when I am looking at a picture and trying to figure out how something was made in that picture and then sort of reverse engineering it and making it myself. And that's just the sort of creative brain that I have. And I don't do very well with working without a reference or working just from my own steam. And I think there's a part of me that is insecure about that. And that's why I needed to, in a very well shot, it was very well lit, well shot video. I needed to sort of justify that for 20 minutes. But, you know, I mean, apart from the fact that there are like many creative industries where like your full goal is recreating something pretty much one for one. You know, there are people that create set designs or, you know, like work on films that are period pieces. As a side note, why does Kong create things that are supposed to be indestructible? Why do they not test them on Samoyeds? You know, there are whole careers of people that do, that recreate sets for period films or films that are, you know, existing IPs that they're trying to base themselves off of. There are people that, you know, make cosplays. There are miniaturists. You know, there's loads of people that are trying to recreate things completely one-to-one, and that doesn't make their craft any less valid. But yeah, apart from that, it's also just like, I don't think it's a big deal, like taking inspiration from other things, especially in fashion. You know, like I think that fashion is so iterative that it's really hard to create anything nowadays that isn't sort of naturally inspired by other things that have come before it. And yeah, and I think like people do it, right? Like people copy other things. Like there was the Lyrica Matoshi dress that everyone copied. There was the Harry Styles, JW Anderson cardigan that everyone on TikTok was recreating for a while. And like those are fun moments in crafting communities, right? Like, I think, you know, I don't think I'm affecting Marni's bottom line. I don't know. Yeah, I think as long as I'm not like massively profiting off of something, or, you know, I'm not Shein mass producing copies of some small businesses thing, then yeah, I think it's probably fine. And maybe I don't need to subject you guys to a 20-minute working out of my own insecurities on film. So yeah, so this segment replaces that segment. I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. If you have any thoughts about feeling okay, about taking inspiration from other things, let me know. Jumpers that I've recreated before. First up, this is a recreation of the Marni patchwork sweater. You may have seen this if you've watched any of my other recent videos, so I won't go on too long. I used the rose knitwear aura top pattern as the basis for the numbers of this, because it's a, you know, very simple, oversized, loose gauge, not even drop shoulder, sort of like just seam up at the top kind of shoulder, and, you know, very minimal with no fuss. I thought the aura top was a perfect match in terms of the construction for the Marni sweater. I used the numbers from that and then I adapted it in pieces, so I made sleeve sections and then seamed them on. I made a front and a back panel and then seamed that. I think in the original pattern the body is knit in the round, but I just split those numbers in two instead of using the full numbers, added a couple of stitches either side, yeah, to get here. The yarn that I used is a combination of things that I had in stash already, plus a couple of extras that I had to acquire. It's a lot of drops kid silk. Either I'm holding the kid silk double, or I'm holding the mohair with a strand of wool, just to get to sort of like a DK weight that I'm then holding on a 6mm to get the gauge that I wanted, which was sort of open and loose. As you can see in the inspiration, the jumper's kind of see-through, so yeah, I wanted to sort of recreate that. Also makes for a quick knit. Yeah, there were also some finishing touches from the Marni sweater that I wanted to recreate. So all of these like stitch details on the front, and then the lines across the argyle. Shout out to the person that told me the word argyle that I forgot last time. The lines across this argyle I did in duplicate stitch later on, rather than mess with the intarsia. And yeah, I think she's mostly successful. Give her like a 7 out of 10. I love the colours. A lot of my shaping's a bit wonky. I was doing a lot of things like without a pattern, so yeah, my arms look a bit funny. She's also a bit short, which is sad, but yeah, 7 out of 10. Jumper number 2. This is a recreation of the ganni jumper, a ganni jumper. It says ganni on the front, has a lot of colour work. It was massively popular for a while. I think the red and the white colorway is the most popular, but there's a green and a purple. The purple's pretty cool. In fact, I think Tiffany Lou was talking about recreating it on one of her streams, which was funny because I was like, hey, I've done that. I made this last year. I used the Guernsey Genzer from the Soft for Women Standesgarn booklet, which is like an all over textured sweater, but I just omitted all of the texture. Used all of the numbers and then added my own colorwork chart to it. I think I chose that one just because it had that like oversized shape that I really wanted, and it was like a drop shoulder that I thought would sort of suit the original the best. It did mean that I had to do the colorwork flat at the top, which was fun. This was my first time doing colorwork properly in a whole garment other than in a swatch, so we learned some things. There's yeah, maybe some bunching around where the letters are, but yeah, mostly kind of successful. I didn't go up a needle size for the color work and then switched to the white here, which probably is the source of a lot of my bunching, and I should probably do that in future. But yeah, other detail that I try to recreate here is that on the sleeves and then on the bottom hems, it's like a twisted rib in a kind of like, on the inspo images, it's like a marl of the two colors held together. So I knew I wanted to do that from the beginning, and so to do that I had to actually hold 2 strands of the white together and 2 strands of the red together to get the gauge that I wanted, and then sort of mix those to do the rib at the end. So that was something that I planned to do rather than thought of doing later. The yarn for this one is a woolly knit merino cone in the off-white colour, held double, and then the red colour is like a vintage wool that I found in a charity shop in Terranure, also held double. They were both fingering weights. It's worked up on a DK weight gauge. Other details, there's some like bits of texture in the original that I tried to recreate. It's like twisted rib here, and then a moss stitch later on, recreated in the sleeves as well. And to do the color work chart, I put all of the numbers from the pattern into Excel or into, I think it was Google Sheets, and then charted it myself based on the reference images, and also this like sadness garden pattern from like the 90s or something that seems to actually be the Norwegian fairisle pattern that Ganni took inspiration from. And then the last thing that I changed is the lettering. Obviously the Target one says Ganni on the front of it and mine doesn't. I thought it was kind of weird to put somebody else's name on something that I spent so many hours knitting, so I put my dog's name on instead because it ends with I and it seemed to fit, but then I thought my other dog would be left out, so I made sure to include him too. And then the names are recreated on the sleeves as well as on the front and the back. Despite the kind of iffy colour work, I would give this one an 8 out of 10. I wear it loads in the winter. I think it looks really good with like cobalt blue or green. Yeah, it's a bit heavy to wear sort of springtime just because of the colour work and the double layer of wool. But yeah, I wear it so much. I think it's like very visually striking. And yeah, I think I did a good job. I did mess up here. The Soft for Women booklet is kind of confusing to read through. It's like an old style of pattern where I think it's, you know, how like our better mothers of knitting probably used instructions in the past, but I think when you're used to sort of modern patterns, then it's a bit jarring to sort of have not a lot of explanation. And yeah, I just skipped a couple of rows. So when I was shaping the neck, it's kind of supposed to be more of an O and it just ends very flatly here. So yeah, that's my bad. But yeah, mostly successful. She's an 8. Third recreation, can't do numbers. Third recreation, not of anything designer this time, but I wanted to recreate those like sailor sweaters with the big collars of the past. I was mostly inspired by this image by an Instagrammer called Josephine, who made this amazing sailor jumper, I'm assuming without pattern. And yeah, I was trying to recreate that as closely as possible, whilst also trying to sort of evoke the sailor sweaters. I used a combination of patterns to make this, 3 I think, maybe. In fact, I used the waist shaping, this like kind of like snatched 80s waist from the Gia zipper sweater from the Soft for Women Sadness Garden booklet that I used before. And I also used Kutvakika's A Stripy Affair sweater, I think it's called, from the Knit This book, which I already owned. And I needed like a drop shoulder v-neck at a kind of like 5mm gauge because that was the yarn that I had. So yeah, I used that. The yarn is a combination of 3 yarns because I was trying to get the perfect red, which is harder than you might think. I already had a strand of woolly knit merino in Rojo Red, which I used held with Isair Jensen. I'd also tried Filcolana Avetta in the shade Cayenne, but it was a bit too light. And then for the kid silk that I held with it, that's Knitting for Olive in the colour Pomegranate. I was trying to get that like, you know, like true red, but with a hint of orange, leaning more on the orange side than on the blue side. And yeah, I was trying to get something really dimensional. So I ended up holding those 3 yarns together on a 5mm needle. I love the fabric, it's super beautiful. And then I just used 2 strands of white and then a mohair for the sort of finishing touches. For the collar, I did a combination of things kind of freehand that I would probably go back and do differently now today, but yeah, it was like my first time doing anything from scratch, so she worked, she's fine. I detailed a lot of the how I did it in my Ravelry project page in case you're interested, but essentially all I did was that I sort of picked up the sides here, added some stitches at the bottom, knit up whilst also increasing in 1x1 rib, and then when I got to the back, pièce de résistance, I had these 2 pieces on either side. And then I picked up on the back neck and sort of continued on in sort of a big block. Yeah, I also slipped the first stitch of every row just so that it created a nice edge and I didn't have to go back and finish it later. And then I used a crochet hook to do this sort of like, it's sitting kind of funny. I used a crochet hook to do this sort of applied chain stitching along here. And then in the rib, I knit the first row when I changed color, just to avoid the sort of like purl gaps when you're changing color when doing 1x1 rib. And again, I think I detailed the exact ratios on the Ravelry page, just in case you're trying to do the same thing. And yeah, I had to do a little bit of like weird sewing up here just because my V-neck ended up quite low. And in general, this isn't like sitting perfectly. I think I would give her like a 6. I would love to I love the yarn. I would love to redo it in like a sort of like 2.0 version, but I think she is what she is. I also really love the shape of the sleeves. I had a really, really deep arm side, probably to do with my gauge, also why the V-neck was quite low. But I sort of fixed that by doing some very intense decreases along the sleeve. And I think I used a different decrease rate, maybe also from another pattern again, because I wanted quite like tight little sleeves. I was also, of course, playing Yarn Chicken, so I needed to decrease as much as possible before I got to the end, which is why I did the waist shaping here. I would have loved a tighter rib here as well. I don't know what happened. I think it blocked out kind of funny. But yeah, that is she in all her glory. And then final piece that I recreated from a designer jumper that I don't have with me, unfortunately, so you'll just get me in a white t-shirt. But hopefully you can use your eyes to look at the photo that I'm putting up here. I recreated an daughter cardigan that they had on their website for a while. I don't think it's available anymore. But it's this sort of beautiful raglan style cardigan. They did it in both like a grey and a white with all of this beautiful color work floral design. I knew that my sister loved it, so I made it for her for Christmas one year. She and I are big fans of daughter, and yeah, I figured I could recreate this one pretty easily without spending the like £400 that I think the daughter one is. So I used the cardigan number 7 pattern, which is like a very basic beginner friendly pattern for like a raglan cardigan. It worked really well as like a first cardigan if you were to make one. It's worked up on 7mm needles, which means that it's super quick, which was great for me because I knew I wanted to do all of that detailing on the front later on, so that moved things along pretty quickly. But I did change some things about it. The button bands along the front are rib in the original pattern, but I did a double knit button band. The original collar I think is just sort of straight up in 1x1 rib, but I did a fold over collar. And then the sleeves, I completely changed the decrease rate. I didn't want the balloon sleeves that are in the pattern, but I wanted something that was more closer to the original. So I think I used the decrease rate from the cardigan number 8 by My Favorite Things Knitwear, which I also own. So that was easily subbed in. And the yarn that I used, I think I used Drops Nepal because it was affordable, and I think it's like a bulky weight, so it fit well with the 7mm needles that are used in the pattern. What else did I change? The rib at the bottom is longer in the inspo images than it is in the pattern. The one thing that the pattern doesn't have is that because it's quite beginner friendly, it doesn't raise the back neck. And then after actually my sister was wearing it for a while, she kind of said that it was riding up at the back. So when I went to visit her last year, I picked up along the bottom rib, cut a hole in it, and then did some short rows in that back rib using like the same yarn that I already had. And that effectively raised the back neck by dropping the bottom a little bit. And it looks pretty seamless. I think there are loads of videos by various people. ATP Atelier did a really good video on sort of like sweater surgery and how to sort of cut into your work to sort of change things that you may not like about it. And yeah, I used a lot of those techniques that she mentioned, basically just picking up, cutting, and then using Kitchener stitch to sort of create the most seamless edge. Yeah, and it worked great. To do the color work on the front panels, hello little girl, I used duplicate stitch. Once I'd knitted the full thing and then blocked it, I kind of marked out on the front panels how many stitches I had. Because the gauge was quite big, I didn't actually have a lot of stitches to work with, so I was like really squeezing my design into it. But yeah, I charted it out the same as I did with the Ganni jumper in Excel or in Google Sheets. And I just, you know, filled in the squares with the colors and tried to mimic, like I was like zooming in on the photo and trying to see like, oh, it's like 2 up, 2 down, over to the left is a yellow. And tried to recreate that pretty much one-to-one on my spreadsheet. And then once I had the spreadsheet, I went in and painstakingly did duplicate stitch over all of the pieces. I think the pattern is different on one side than it is on the other side. So yeah, I couldn't just mirror it. I made 2 different versions of the chart to do that. And it took a while, but it was quite fun. I did it whilst watching TV. And I give this one a 10 out of 10. I love it. I think it looks really good on my sister. I would love one for myself. I have loads of yarn that's kind of like Drops in a Pole, but not quite. It's like an old Debbie Bliss yarn. I might recreate this in future with that yarn. I don't love it. I don't love the way that it like wears. It's very similar to the Nepal. It has like a wool and alpaca mix. But yeah, it just feels a bit like oily. I don't know how to describe it. But I have loads of it and I should definitely get it out of stash. So I might use it to make another one of these in future. Also because the cardigan knit up so quickly on 7mm. So yeah, it would be rude not to, I guess. There's also, yeah, another version in a white with the same colors on the front. But I have the grey, so I might as well do that. But yeah, she's a 10 out of 10. She looks great. She's really popular on Ravelry as well. I got loads of, it's like my most amount of hearts that I've ever had on a Ravelry project. So that's fun. Yeah, 10 out of 10 would recreate again. So some quick tips for duping designer sweaters if you want to. Some of these are pretty self-explanatory, but might as well go through them just in case. 1, don't pick up the phone. 1, find photos, as many photos as you can, front and back, preferably any detail shots. If the piece is listed on like a resale website, then yeah, that can be really helpful because I can have all of the detail shots. For example, I wouldn't have known that this piece had a different coloured back if I hadn't noticed that there was photos of the back. I probably would have just done like a recreation of the front. 2, the yarn that you're going to use to recreate it, I think is the first step for me anyway. I think it's really easy to find patterns. I think it's easy to adapt patterns. I think there are hundreds and hundreds of patterns out there, but depending on whether you want to work from stash or not, or depending on how much yarn you can get in your country, wherever you're based, I think this is also the biggest like cost imperative is usually the yarn. So that's usually the first thing I look at or I start thinking about when I'm looking at things that I'm taking inspiration from. An example of this piece, I knew it had to be a lot of colours. I'm very lucky I have quite a large stash with a lot of colours in it that I built up over time. So I was able to mostly do this from stash, but if you're looking to recreate something that's quite colourful, I might look at what I have in stash already or go out to sort of procure things that I'd need to get. So also, what's the fibre of the yarn that you want to use? Did they, you know, are you trying to recreate something that's quite fluffy? Then you might want to use like a mohair or an alpaca. Is it sort of like shiny and matte? It could be like a plant fibre that you're aiming for. Yeah, define the qualities of the thing that you like in the photo and then try and recreate that in the yarn. 3, the construction, the pattern that you're going to use. Try and figure out whether it's a drop shoulder, top down, blah blah blah, or a raglan, or a satin sleeve, or sort of the details of the construction that you would need to recreate. That kind of narrows down your list of patterns. Ravelry is an incredibly powerful tool, has like one of the best search engines I've ever seen. It's the easiest way to find patterns that match the construction. If there are any like details of things that you'd need to, like really specific elements that you'd need sort of a pattern or a tutorial to recreate, I'm thinking like, does it have bubbles? Is there a technique that you've never used before, etc. I might look for a pattern that incorporates those or start doing research on how to do that technique. start swatching, that kind of thing. 4D. 7? I don't know. The last thing I'm looking at then is the gauge. If I already have the pattern and the yarn, I have a good idea of what my gauge might be, and I might try and analyze the photos to see like how big it looks, if it's like a really fine net, if it's a loose and open gauge, etc. That might influence what pattern I might use, but at the same time, I'm probably going to find the pattern with the details that I want and maybe try and adapt the gauge to that, rather than try and find the perfect gauge and then find the pattern that matches the details, if you see what I mean. 5. Do you want to adapt the whole sweater, or do you just want to use color inspiration from it? I think, yeah, designer sweaters or, you know, ready to wear pieces that you may be using for inspiration are actually really good color choice inspiration. If you struggle with finding color combinations like me, if you see a pattern, you don't really know what color you might want to knit it in, especially if you know you want to knit something with stripes but you don't know what stripes, etc. Looking at ready to wear inspiration I find is really powerful. For example, the Johannes Loop sweater is something that I've had on my wish list for a while since it came out. It hasn't been out that long. I wouldn't have really known what colors I would have wanted to have chosen for that without looking at this piece that's been on my wish list for a while. I think the colors in that would be really easy to recreate in the color work from that jumper. And yeah, I don't have to sort of mess around trying to create the jumper one-to-one. I can just sort of take the color inspiration and then feed it into my own. Oh, very cute. Before I get into sort of plans that I have to dupe sweaters in the future, I thought I'd just quickly talk through some designers that I think are good to look at if you are interested in looking at inspiration for your knitwear. I think, you know, there's an infinite number of designers that you can look at, but I think these ones are particularly good at their knitwear choices and have some really interesting pieces. Top one always is Ann Daughter. They do some very simple pieces, but they also do like the Ann Daughter piece that I copied from my sister before. They do some very visually interesting pieces. If you're really into sort of romantic pieces or things that are more feminine and have more lace elements or more like twee elements, I think the Miu Miu or Mui Mui, depending on how you like to pronounce it, are good to look at. Anna Sui to a lesser extent. I also love Simone Rocha, as you may know from some of my other podcasts, and Molly Goddard do some really beautiful pieces of knitwear as well. Molly Goddard you might know from the big pink frou-frou dress from Killing Eve. If you kind of like that style, then they're a good one to look for knitwear. If you're more into that sort of Scandi, you know, bright, colourful, a bit modern style, I think that Marni and Acne are really good to look at. There's also, I think Jill Sander do some really lovely knitwear pieces, and JW Anderson are the maker of the Harry Styles patchwork cardigan, but they also every season do some very cool knitwear. Oh, and then also the obvious Scandi influence, Ganni. Gucci as well. Gucci particularly circa like 2018. If you're into more streetwear style or maybe sportswear inspired stuff or anything that's more deconstructed, I would look to Bode. I think Raf Simons do some really nice pieces. And then like anything like Balenciaga. And then finally some brands that aren't quite considered designer, but I think are interesting to look at. Cezanne, See New York, they're famous for their dresses, but they do a couple of interesting pieces of knitwear. And then Boden, which is a UK brand, and also like Mini Boden, their kids wear line. Really good, especially for like color inspiration, and if you like sort of like rainbow inspired knits, they're really good to look at. Another designer I just thought of as well, Totem. They do some really beautiful knitwear. And La Mer, maybe? Sort of those, oh, the Row as well. Those very high end, you know, like very expensive, but very sleek kind of brands. If you're into that look, I think they're good to look at. And then for the final segment of this video, I wanted to take you through my Pinterest board, everything that I've sort of saved knitting wise, briefly taking you through some things that I've seen and that I'd love to knit in the future, and kind of how I would go about making those things come to life. So hopefully with editing magic. You can see my Pinterest screen here. So yeah, you can probably see here that a lot of the things that I like are quite colorful and quite as I don't know, there's a lot of stripes, it's all a bit modern. So if you're not into this style, this may not be as relevant for you. But yeah, I just keep a sort of running list of inspiration from different places. It's not all designers, but a lot of it is. And yeah, I just kind of keep an eye on these when I'm sort of deciding what next thing I want to knit. And then you may also see here some brands that I've already talked about of things that I think are really dupeable. Here you can actually see the sweater that I've already made and that I'm wearing right now. And then some of these are actually just knitwear patterns in general. But yeah, so to go back to the beginning and just take you through a rough inspiration, like this one, this ganni vest, I think is really cool. You could definitely use, like if you see here, kind of looks like maybe like a self-striping sock yarn or something. You could definitely try and use, I mean, maybe it then be like a fingering weight pattern or maybe two sock yarns held double. But yeah, I'm immediately thinking like a space dye or like a sock yarn. This would be really easy to make. It seems to be like just like a sleeveless vest. There is some kind of stitch pattern here where it's almost like a garter, like triangle. So that seems to be like stockinette on the knit side, and then that's like reverse stockinette on the purl side. Some kind of like, don't know, diagonal weird shaped thing there that you might have to figure out. But then the ganni on the front, depending on what word you wanted to do, I would probably do that in duplicate stitch. So I wouldn't even bother doing it whilst I'm knitting the garment, and I would just come back in and do it later. If you know the designer, I'm blanking on her name, but she does a lot of duplicate stitch over jumpers that she's knit or sort of thrifted jumpers. So yeah, that would be very easily achievable. This is something that I've actually tried to do in the past and I've never quite gotten around to. I completely hyperfixated on this. I love Le Kilt. They do a really good sort of like Scottish inspired kilt. They mostly do kilts. They're called Le Kilt. But yeah, they're a really good designer and I love this colorway. And I think you could sort of create a skirt out of like really densely knit just panels and then maybe sewn up along to create darts and then turning it into a skirt. And then I think I would just use mohair and then brush out the mohair. I know Spectacle Strick has done that with a couple of her patterns in the past. Some great inspiration here. So that is Molly Goddard. This is also Molly Goddard, so you could do some intarsia there. This one I thought was interesting. It's a Bottega Veneta jumper. I don't know how I would go about this because you could either do it in intarsia, but oh my god, sort of carrying or like having all of those bits of yarn would be really difficult. Or I guess you could just knit it diagonally and do it in stripes. And then probably do some seaming. I think this would be a really interesting one to attempt, but it's also got really good color inspiration. I love these colors. So yeah, that was a good one. Here you can see like a load of like jacquard, kind of fairisle, circular yoke cardigans. There is no lack of circular yoke cardigan patterns anywhere. Certainly on Ravelry. And yeah, I think you could probably adapt an existing pattern or even look at like vintage patterns and things like that, and just sort of steal their colorways and not even really have to modify all that much. Again, we have some more marni and some more ganni. This ganni you'd probably have to do sort of an intarsia or maybe duplicate stitch on just a plain jumper. This marni again, either duplicate stitch or some form of intarsia. This is one that I have a plan for that I would love to knit in the future. Alexa Chung is really well known for this jumper. I think she's like, she bought it.
Chinese music on Amazon Music.
Alexa, stop. Okay. I'm definitely not allowed to say her name. This model is well known for this jumper because she did an interview where she said that she bought it in the men's section of Prada and then just like never stopped wearing it. And she's been photographed like so many times wearing this piece of knitwear again. And I just really, really love how sort of versatile it is and how it would sort of fit in really well, kind of like a boyish take. I have a swatch I'll try and put up a photo of, and I have the yarn ready to go. I think so one of the things that I struggled with this one is that it seems to be like a saddle shoulder. It's hard, I think, on drop shoulders to get the stripes to line up, and there seems to be one sort of vertical stripe along the shoulder. You can probably see better, yeah, here. And then that seems to be like a cap sleeve, like a proper inset sleeve, and not, you know, a drop shoulder sleeve. So I struggled to find patterns that would sort of allow me to do that. The best match that I could find was the Aros sweater by Petite Knit. And even so, I have these yarns in a DK weight, which is perfect for the Aros. But if I wanted to add a strand of mohair, for example, or go up, there's also the terrazzo sweater, which I think is basically the Aros sweater, but just at a slightly bigger gauge. So I think like this one I have ready to go, and that's sort of my inspiration for that. This is another one which I plan to do pretty much immediately, and I have a swatch. I think it's like so easily duped. After having sort of worked out the Intarsia and the Argyle on this jumper, and thank you to that one commenter that reminded me of the name of it. Yeah, I think this would be like a really easy one to do. Plus you don't have to knit sleeves, so it would be quite a quick knit. I have most of the yarns. I think maybe I'd have to source this like brown. I'd probably do it in a DK, just because those are the yarns that I have. Plus it's sort of easy to match like a strand of DK plus 2 strands of fingering, and sort of match that across a bunch of different colors that are already in stash. And yeah, I just think again, like over a t-shirt or over a shirt, that would be really cool. And I have the vest number 1 pattern, which I think by My Favorite Things Knitwear, which I think is a perfect match for this, and not much modification needed. Maybe lower the arm side a bit, because I think the vest number 1 kind of comes up quite high, and I'd want this to be more oversized. Okay, what else do we have here? This is an Andaughter jumper, I believe, and so is, let me find it. So is this one. I have plans to knit this in the future, but it's kind of daunting just because of the amount of color work there. Again, I think I would probably just take a like a drop shoulder sort of DK weight pattern, and then just sort of modify the chart then based on the numbers to sort of create this intense color work. I think what's also interesting is switching the colors in the rib. Is like one thing to take note there. And then so there also seems to be like some text there, so I'd probably have to figure out what the text is if I want to change it, and then maybe do that in duplicate stitch rather than Intarsia, just to make my life easier. But yeah, I think this one, another thing that would be quite difficult to do here, you can see where the body matches up with the sleeve. If you wanted that to match when it was falling down, you'd probably have to calculate things for that to sort of like visually fit. But yeah, this is one that I have on my radar. Let's have a look. This is really just color inspiration. Same with these socks, same with these curtains, which I don't know why this is on my Pinterest board. Yeah, I think if you had a lot of those yarns in stash, you could make this quite easily, again, out of like some just normal vest pattern. Here I would use a mohair, probably mohair scraps. I probably have all of these yarns available already. Yeah. Another one that I've knit a swatch for in the past and never quite figured out. So this is by Acne. And yeah, it just seems to be these wavy stripes. If you've seen like Rebecca Clow's Tide sweater. I think that would be a really good match for this jumper in particular, if you wanted to do it more in a lace and create the waves that way. The other way that I try to do it is in stranded color work, which is really laborious, I guess, like especially like all over the knit. So yeah, you would have to sort of weigh up the pros and cons. I think if I were to do it, I'd probably do the stranded color work just because I like it visually more. And yeah, I would brush out whatever I chose to use here. I think in my swatch I used an alpaca silk rather than a mohair. And I think that brushed out would create that like really fuzzy look, which works here. Some more stripes, very basic. This is just a pattern. This is some more color inspiration. Yeah, and then finally, this is one that I've had on my wish list for a while. This is by Mansour Gabriel. And I would probably, again, just do sort of like a very simple drop shoulder. You can see there's some like increases here. This might even be brioche, although I think I would probably skip that because I don't want to do intarsia in brioche. That sounds like a nightmare. But yeah, I would probably do the circles in intarsia and then maybe end up doing those in duplicate stitching. Just try and make your life as easy as possible. This is very simple. This would literally just be like a border. Oh, okay, no, so along the seams there, whoops. So along the seams there, that you would actually probably have to seam this garment, at least along the shoulders. So maybe look for a like a set-in sleeve, and then like a seamed set-in sleeve, and then when you're at the point of seaming them, you would do the, what's it called, that sort of like whip stitch around the edges, or like a crochet like add-on. You would do that before seaming them, or maybe after, I'm not really sure. Yeah, and that would just be kind of like a contrast yarn. You wouldn't even need to do a button band here. It just seems to be like straight stockinette with like a sort of like semi V, like maybe like a short V and then straight down. But yeah, this would be pretty simple to recreate. This one as well, like I think this is just like pick a pattern and, you know, like use the colors from this pattern to sort of influence your choices. You don't even need to get that close to the garment itself. Yeah, this would be great for intarsia. This one maybe duplicate stitch. I don't know, loads of inspiration there. And then this is kind of one where like a yarn choice would be more interesting. You'd probably again have to hold this yarn double because it seems like it's mauled. So you could hold like a burgundy with a blue, and then in certain places maybe just like maybe even do like 3 thin strands, and then like at some point hold 2 and 1 instead of 1 and 3 or whatever. But yeah, it seems to be like slightly mauled, so you could do some sort of color manipulation there. And then again with that other, again with the rib, that looks like it's sort of like a 1-to-1 ratio. I don't actually know how you'd go about this. Maybe even like a space dyed yarn would be interesting. And then the marni written out here, it seems to be like different colored stripes through it. Yeah, this would be a fun one to recreate. Yeah, and last but not least, this is the, I can't say her name because it'll trigger my certain device, but Miss Chung and her jumper. This is one that she made with her brand, I believe, and it's like the dog jumper. And yeah, I think this one's really interesting to do an intarsia maybe, or maybe some elements of duplicate stitch. I think if you were really needing like a brown sweater in your wardrobe, then that's an interesting one to sort of dupe. And I like looking at the silhouette, it kind of looks like maybe the Louvre sweater by Petite Knit, or you know, something that's a bit more like oversized on the top, like almost like a semi-dolman sleeve, or you know, like could do with a raglan there. Even though I actually think like in real life it's drop shoulder, but I think the shape is kind of perfect for that. Yeah, here another Jill Sander knit. Again, very simply done. This is literally just a black vest, and then you're sort of adding some crochet details in a contrast yarn. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this was fun. If you do want to leave a comment, maybe tell me about a piece that you've seen online that you want to recreate. I'm always looking for inspiration, so I'd love to hear yours. And yeah, thank you so much. Bye. Hi, gorgeous girl. Thanks for the lick. It's not that interesting. I'm just talking. Hi. Do good wax? You do good wax? Okay, bye. Oh my god. Working with animals, am I right? You serious, Ken? Oh yeah. That's a really good one. That's a really good one. Alright, get out, please. No, get out, please. Cammy, get out! No. Oh, Jesus Christ.
I feel like I'm a little bit kind of wishy-washy and
It's on the phone. The designer sweaters that I've duped in the past, Cammy, I swear to God. Okay, you got this. You got this. This. So I use the cardigan number 7 pattern.